What's going on, Cowboy Nation? We all know what today is. The deadline for teams, NFL teams, to figure out their final 53-man roster going into week 1 has come and gone. So let's check out what exactly the Dallas Cowboys have done. Of course, we do know that there will be some gymnastics and roster gymnastics, strategic ways, I guess, to get guys through waiver wires, to see who's going to pass through these waiver wires. Some veterans potentially that could hopefully come back to your team and contribute, because again, we do know this still is all a work in progress. Going into week 1, you're going to look for guys that can potentially be special teams contributors, or guys that are potentially going to be able to help out in case of injury or just anything like that. So we'll check it out right now. Just a quick look at the final 53-man roster for now going into week 1 for the Dallas Cowboys. Let's take a look.
Of course, this goes without saying. We already know Dak Prescott. That spot is solidified. QB1. I mean, it is what it is. We know what Dak Prescott is going into year 8. This is a guy we should have lots of confidence in, because I feel like last season, I'm very critical of a guy like Dak Prescott because I know what I believe his potential is, and I know what he can get done and what we've seen him get done. But it's all about putting it together at the same time, because at the end of the day, when you look up and get to the playoffs, especially, we're done as Cowboys fans. Of course, I already know with these nice regular seasons, pull off 10, 11, 12 win seasons, but then we get to the playoffs and it somehow can just never go all together in one piece. And it always falls apart, whether it's the offense, whether it's the defense, whether it's just untimely mistakes, penalties. We all know. But at the end of the day, Dak Prescott is the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. We know what that is going forward. So he's going to get the criticism. He's going to get the blame for a lot of things, whether it's justified or not. So year 8, it's time to get it done. Of course, Cooper Rush. Last season, we already know the 4-1 run. He's also been the season before. We know Cooper Rush up to this point. He's been a nice, solid, serviceable guy, a game manager. He's more, again, I don't want to say, yeah, we can go at this point pretty much. Cooper Rush is just a game manager. Let's be clear. We saw exactly what happened in the Eagles game. When a team figures out what exactly Cooper Rush's weaknesses are, they will be able to pinpoint him. That's why you have backups, you have starters. So Cooper Rush, he's a guy that I personally felt was going to have somewhat of a battle when we're talking about Will Grier. But we saw exactly how that worked, just because I felt Will Grier is more capable of using his legs. And to me, I value that, especially when we're talking about a West Coast system, because it's going to be about staying on schedule. And sometimes plays break down. We need you to roll out and use your legs a little bit. Cooper Rush, that's not really his strong suit. But up to this point, he has been serviceable. I feel like he's a very smart guy. So he's a guy that's going to be able to figure out the system and figure out his spot in it real well. So that's not anything to be concerned about. That's a nice, solid QB2. Also, of course, we know what Trey Lance is. We've gone over this, seeing Cowboys fans in general, the fan base, entire community, has gone over what Trey Lance is for this team. Is he going to be just a guy that's be a stopgap guy? I'm talking about for your backup, serviceable quarterback type level guy, or is he potentially going to be a guy that you're looking at if these extension talks don't go well with Dak Prescott? And we're, potentially find ourselves looking up and saying, okay, what are our other options? Could Trey Lance be that guy? He is 23 years old. So again, lots to still work on in his game, and he still has time to figure it out. I don't think Trey Lance is anything of a finished product. So people that just want to call it quits on him at now, I think that's a little too early, a little too premature. But at the same time, it's going to be up in the air to figure it out. But we do know going into year 1 of the Trey Lance, Dak Prescott, I guess, dynamic, Dak Prescott's your starting quarterback. That's without question. Cooper Rush is going to be your second for now. Now, I can see that changing a little bit in the future. But for now, let's just figure out where exactly these guys fit around. But we know QB1 is pretty much solidified. Another obvious, of course, Tony Pollard is running back 1. He's going to be that guy that we're going to expect. Because last season, of course, that was his splash season, I guess you want to say, where I guess the front office, you want to say, and maybe the coaching staff also felt comfortable with letting a guy like Zeke Elliott go, because, of course, you can see over the last few years, Zeke Elliott has definitely declined in athleticism. And just, I guess, you can't really complain about, because we know it's common sense at this point. Running backs take beatings and beatings week after week. The wear and tear will eventually catch up with everybody. That's why usually guys look at the running backs as if they're more expendable than everybody else. Because, again, we do know the wear and tear. A guy starts pushing close to 30, and you pretty much should be out of the league. That's the way it's looked at. So Tony Pollard, this is going to be his time to shine. I feel like he's way more than capable. He's going to show out. I feel like I'm looking at a guy with potentially a 1,200-yard season, also another 500 to 600 yards receiving. Excuse me, I said 1,200 rushing for Tony Pollard and another 500 to 600 yards receiving. I can see that very well being I won't say the ceiling, but I guess a solid basis for what Tony Pollard we can expect as a fan base from him. Also, Rico Dowdle, a guy I've talked about extensively a little bit this entire training camp process. I feel like he's a guy that Mike McCarthy has spoken about glowingly multiple times because, again, he just loves his kid's tenacity. He loves the way that he is willing to throw his body in there. We're talking about pass blocking and also just his running ability. When you watch him run, he has a tenacity and a ferociousness that you really can't coach. A guy like, now we're looking at a guy that didn't make it through waivers, of course, being a guy that got cut today. We're looking at Malik Davis. That is not a guy that I was looking at to potentially be over Rico Dowdle because I felt Rico Dowdle has more of a, well-rounded game. And I like Malik Davis to an extent. But I feel like once you drafted a guy like Deuce Vaughn, he's going to have his packages. And one thing I do want to say, I see lots of times people are still trying to throw in who's going to be running back two, who's going to be that guy that's going to be behind Tony Pollard. I don't feel like this is necessarily a solidified type situation because I feel like they're going to be not really running back twos, running back threes. There's going to be running back 2A, running back 2B. Whether you want to have that be Rico Dowdle or Deuce Vaughn, it doesn't really matter to me. Everybody's going to be able to touch the ball this season because, again, we do know the versatility that we've seen from a guy like Deuce Vaughn, whether it's running through the tackles, whether it's receiving the ball out of the backfield. He is not a guy I'm worried about, and I feel like Rico Dowdle is just going to be a nice complementary piece to that. Also, let's take a look at a guy I'm a huge fan of. I know we didn't see too much prior to the Raiders game, the preseason game, but Hunter Lepke, that's a guy I'm really having some real confidence in because I feel like he is a guy that's still, again, a little raw himself, but he's going to be able to build his game and develop. Again, I like to say a guy like Kyle Juszczyk using San Francisco for the 49ers. A guy like, if you remember, John Kuhn for the Green Bay Packers during the Mike McCarthy era, I guess, his tenure there in Green Bay. These are guys that you're looking to use in multiple different ways. Again, a guy that's going to be able to catch the ball a little bit. A guy, of course, we're going to have to work on his run blocking because what you did not see a lot, which I wish we would have, is this coaching staff be able to, I guess, put him in those positions to be able to get that experience, those game reps, albeit against guys that are trying to make other teams, of course, on the bubble. But I would have liked to see Hunter Lepke get a little bit more when it comes to these fullback, I guess, kind of duties, just because one thing we did get to see is that he is able to catch the ball and he runs hard. He runs hard. Again, you can't coach that. Like I said about Rico Dowdle, you can't really coach that. Some guys just have that intensity, that tenaciousness or tenacity, or they don't. And I feel like Hunter Lepke is a guy that's going to still be able to learn on the fly. He's going to hit the ground running because I feel like one thing you're going to be able to use him in these certain different red zone type packages. A guy you're going to be able to find to slip out around the goal line. A guy sometimes if it's just in short yardage situations. So keep your eyes on Hunter Lepke because, again, this is a guy that's going to have lots of room to grow, and I feel like he's going to be able to be in the perfect position to get that done. Obviously, it goes without saying, we know the obvious guys. Of course, CeeDee Lamb. We're looking at a guy we're talking about his rookie year, 74 catches, 935 yards. Second year in the league, 79 catches, 1,102 yards. 5 touchdowns his first year. And now his last season, of course, which is his breakout season in year 3, 107 catches, 1,359 yards, 12.7 average, and 9 total touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb took over that wide receiver 1 role, and it wasn't anything that was even questioned by the end of the season and by the end of just our season in general, even a playoff game. We do know CeeDee Lamb is that guy. I don't worry about him because one thing I will say, if you just watch the game that he plays, now you just watch how much more fluid he is in his route running. And I give a lot of credit to guys like Amari Cooper because we do know the technician that he is. And luckily, CeeDee Lamb got to have that his first couple years in this league, a guy that was able to play off of him and see exactly the type of player that you should be. Because, again, when it comes to receivers, we do know the smoother you are, the more you can just play off instinct and you're not out there playing choppy and thinking too much. CeeDee Lamb pretty much mastered that last season. I feel like all he's going to do now is adding in a guy like Brandon Cooks. That's going to do nothing but open up the rest of the field because we do know Brandon Cooks still has some juice left in those legs. I don't doubt him. I'm not worried about him at all because, again, this system is pretty much, I'm going to say, a match made in heaven for guys like him, because we're talking about a guy that's good in space. He understands how to just find those small spots, because again, Brandon Cooks is not he's not the biggest guy either. We're talking about in height or stature in general, but he does have that athleticism. He has that speed and that quickness, and he's a guy I'm not worried about when it comes to catching these balls over the middle of the field. We do know Dak Prescott, although last season we'll say there were some issues, and sometimes whether it was all his fault or not, because again, sometimes these receivers, it just seemed they were off, because look up. When you're talking about, I remember go to the Titans game. That was one, especially the Packers game, but especially the Titans game. A bad ball bounce off Peyton Hendershot's hands. I felt like we saw that a lot. These guys now, we're talking about your Brandon Cooks, we're talking about your CeeDee Lamb type guys, and now being able to add a guy like Jalen Tolbert into the mix, because we do know, I'm going to say in year 2, I'm looking at potentially maybe a 400, 500-yard season from a guy like Jalen Tolbert. That's all being, we're going to figure out what exactly Michael Gallup's going to be for this team. Is he going to be a guy that he's going to be able to just be a red zone weapon for us? Or is Michael Gallup going to be the guy that we kind of, I guess, got used to his first year or so in the league? I'm not sure, but I feel like Jalen Tolbert is going to cover that up. So it's good to just see the development and that work that he's been putting in addition to guys, like, of course, like Michael Gallup and Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb working with Dak Prescott this offseason. They're starting to pay off. Also, Kevontae Turpin. That's been a mix that we kind of saw throughout this training camp process, of course, also because Kevontae Turpin, last year, we know what he was. He's pretty much your guy that you were just counting on to be your special teams weapon. And he had some nice, solid spots here and there throughout the season. Of course, he ends up as a Pro Bowler. I feel like a lot of that was off more the popularity. You play for the Dallas Cowboys, of course. That name kind of will come with it. But I feel like now Mike McCarthy kind of spoke on it prior to training camp. We're talking about in OTAs. He says Kevontae Turpin is going to have to show that he can be more of a weapon outside of just special teams, because at the end of the day, you're going to be able to find guys that can return the ball for you. Might not be as dynamic with it maybe, but if they're going to be able to contribute in other spaces and areas on this team, then that's going to be able to, I guess, kind of take over what you can do. So Kevontae Turpin, if he's able to actually make some plays, which I feel like he can, because again, we have seen him a little bit during the preseason, that he was kind of be able to, he looked more solid and solid to me, because watching just even training camp highlights, of course, we're going to go through film throughout the training camp situation, of course, with Kevontae Turpin playing a little bit more receiver. As you saw, as the training camp went, to me, it felt he got more smooth in his route running, got more smooth with just catching the ball with his hands, things like that. Because we do know with Dak Prescott, he will give you a chance. So Kevontae Turpin, I'm glad to see him actually be able to find a spot on this team outside of just a special teams guy. Now, again, I'm going to say I'm excited for this guy, just because I've kind of been speaking on him since the draft. I said it's a guy you want to kind of take a look at. We don't know what exactly he is, but he seemed to be one of the kids that kind of rolls to the occasion, I guess you can say. Because look at Jalen Brooks out of South Carolina, 7th round pick. This kid did nothing but show that he has some potential. And when we're talking about rookies, you're not expecting them to be a finished product. You're not expecting them to be a guy that you're sitting here. I'm not asking Jalen Brooks to come in and to be a 800-yard receiver, even a 500-yard receiver his first year in the league. But because what you're expecting for Jalen Brooks is just so that he has a spot and he can come in and be a guy. Albeit, we can say last season and a couple seasons prior to that, a guy like Noah Brown. I'm going to look for Jalen Brooks to be a better Noah Brown, a more consistent with the hands kind of Noah Brown player, if we can get that. Because Noah Brown, although he did have some issues last season, we saw, Noah Brown was a nice, solid, complementary piece when you start talking about your 4th, 5th, 6th type receiver. Jalen Brooks, he's going to be able to find himself some spots, whether it's a guy that needs a breather or whether a guy is, he's just not being able to take advantage of a matchup that's specific or particular day. And I feel like Mike McCarthy's going to give Jalen Brooks a chance at certain times. So keep your eyes open for this kid. I'm saying I don't think it's just going to be a guy that you're looking at solely as just a depth piece. We do know wide receiver room is very loaded, but Jalen Brooks, I'm glad to have him a part of it. The tight end room, Jake Ferguson, starts out with him. That's tight end 1. Jake Ferguson, I feel like this is going to be a year for him to show up and actually show that he can make plays, because, again, that's why this team felt so comfortable letting go of a guy like Dalton Schultz, because Dalton Schultz had his own flaws, But one thing Dalton Schultz did have is that chemistry with Dak Prescott. That's a guy you did find at certain times being able to make big catches, solid catches, whether it's a first down type situation or a big touchdown, because you will kind of lose him in the middle of the field. I feel like Jake Ferguson is going to hit that, take over that role, take over that duty and not really have any issues. It's not. I don't feel like he's going to be a guy that you're going to have to worry about, because Jake Ferguson, I trust him with his hands. That's not a guy that I think I looked at solely. Because coming out of college, of course, he was a guy that everyone was kind of just talking about and touted him as pretty much just a guy that's going to be a run blocker. Because, again, he was going to be more of a complementary piece to a guy like Dalton Schultz. But now, when Dalton Schultz not in that picture anymore, Jake Ferguson, you're going to have to step up. You're going to have to make more plays and show that you're going to be able to be that guy down in and down out. Because, again, there is nobody else that we're going to be counting on to be number one. Luke Schoonmaker, I feel like he does have a nice, solid skill set, but he's still going to be a work in progress. Peyton Hendershot, that's not a guy I'm going to be calling out there to be my guy week in, week out, just because one thing you're going to expect, and what we've seen over the last year or so, we talk about Peyton Hendershot as if he's just this complete possession tight end. He's not that either, but he is a kid that has some solid skills. So that's not a guy that I'm just willing to dump off the table just because. But Peyton Hendershot, he's going to pretty much be, I'm going to look to personally say, I think Luke Schoonmaker is going to take over tight end too. By the end of the season, that's going to be a solidified role for Luke Schoonmaker. Peyton Hendershot will have his opportunities. Of course, we're going to have certain packages, especially when we're going heavy on the tight ends and heavy on the line, because you're going to have Peyton Hendershot. I can see certain times we having all three of them out there at the same time. We'll see how it goes. But Luke Schoonmaker, work in progress, but I love to see the fact that he kind of did get his feet wet. Nice touchdown catch against the Raiders in the preseason game. So hopefully he can keep rolling. This tight end room is solidified and locked in. Of course, the O-line starts with Tyron Smith. Of course, going into year 13 for him. We're talking about a 2-time first-team All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowler. Tyron Smith has been that consistent Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer that we know he is. But, of course, we all do know at the same time, he has been dealing with some injuries over these last few years. And that's pretty much, at this point, it feels like that's something to be kind of expected. You're going to wait for the time that Tyron Smith will somehow end up with an injury, whether it's due to something that, again, happens to him in a game or just something that's going to come up, because things just feel like they're lingering with Tyron Smith at this point. But at this point, he is still a solid piece, because to me, even if you don't see him as the best left tackle in the league anymore, if you don't see him as a top 2 tackle in the left tackle in the league anymore, he's still a guy. If you could say you can give me top 5 talent level, still Tyron Smith, we'll do just fine with that for the time being, because we do know Tyler Smith going into his year 2. You want to keep that consistency on that left side of this line, because he did be able to have a little bit of run with Tyron Smith. Of course, we do know Jason Peters was pretty much a guy that worked in some too. It was a crapshoot last year. We're trying to figure out, is Tyler Smith going to be a left tackle? Is he going to be a left guard for right now? Now it's going to seem, hopefully, Tyron Smith has gotten through training camp healthy. That's a good sign. Tyler Smith, you're going to solidify that left guard position. We know Tyler Biadasz, a nice solid season last year. We're talking about a guy that, again, just development. And that's the number one thing I love to see, especially a guy like Tyler Biadasz. He's not the best center in the league, but he's a guy that you can go out there and you can count on and trust that he can get the job done. Now, again, you're just looking for all these guys to pretty much just work on their deficiencies to a certain extent, because the one thing you do know right next to that, Zach Martin, great to have him back. Of course, we got that contract situation figured out, something I did not want to go into week 1 having to worry about still. We got it locked in. That's your right guard, Terrence Steele. This, to me, is where everything's going to be figured out. It's going to be these 2 tackle positions, left tackle and right tackle. Can we keep Tyron Smith, as healthy as possible for as long as possible for this long run? And can we get Terrence Steele to be back to what he was prior to the injury? Because we do know Terrence Steele is the perfect example of what I just said from a Tyler Biadasz. Development. Terrence Steele has shown himself to just be a guy that works hard, gets in the lab, and stays working on his game. That's Terrence Steele. If we can get him back because I feel like this run game is pretty much going to be very contingent on things like Terrence Steele, his health holding up, because I don't want to go into any issue, because now what we're going to have to ask ourselves, the depth on this O-line, that's where the worry comes from. Are you confident of Matt Waletzko? I'm not. I'm not comfortable just saying that that's somebody we're going to worry about. We do know at this point, Josh Ball. I'm not confident in a Josh Ball at this point. But I'm not also at the same time thinking that this is even a finished product. I am going to say one thing I am definitely happy about is seeing TJ Bass and Richards, Austin Richards from North Carolina. That kid has shown so much potential, and also TJ Bass. He's a mauler. I can see in a couple years that might be a guy that you're looking at to find. Does he have a spot on his O-line? Can we move around some other pieces? I'm not saying Zach Martin or anything like that. I'm not saying even Tyler Smith. We'll figure out what exactly. But if potentially you could see yourself maybe throwing a guy like a Tyler Smith. Potentially, he's going to be your future left tackle. We'll see. We don't know exactly how the Tyler Smith dynamic is going to go over these next couple years or so. But this is a great, solid piece. Again, of just grabbing two young guys that I feel do have some future potential. I can see an Austin Richards potentially being a starter on your O-line in the future. Again, a work in progress, but he did show lots of glimpses during this preseason, and I feel like he played better at at the tackle position than he did playing the guard position. Not saying he was terrible in the guard position, but I can see him being a guy that's going to be more of just a swing tackle. Let some of these young guys develop. But we do now have some solid pieces, I guess, young guys. But I still want to see us actually take a look at the trade market and take a look at some of these other guys that maybe slip through the cracks in these waiver wires, because I do want this O-line depth to be where it needs to be. I don't feel like it's fully locked into where it should, but it's a solid start. Taking a look at the D-line, the most obvious we already know is Micah Parsons, of course. 2 years in the league, 26 and a half total sacks. That's not a guy we're worried about. That's the lion. That's the most ferocious player on this defense. That's the best player on this defense. Probably the best player on this team, of course. So Micah Parsons, that's the most obvious. We just need him to come in and be exactly who he always is. Keep that same passion, keep that same intensity. To me, Micah Parsons is one of those players. He has that, I guess, just that entire energy, that vibe, that aura. It goes through the entire team, but especially this defense. Everything runs off of that. So, of course, Micah Parsons, we're looking to have a huge year for him. Hopefully, we can finally grab him one of those Defensive Player of the Year awards, because he's always in the mix. He's always been in the mix. And it's crazy to say he's always in the mix. He's only been in the league 2 years. But Micah Parsons, he's a dog. He's an animal out there. So let's just let him be who he is. DeMarcus Lawrence, obviously the wily veteran at this point, the guy that's going to be always in the right places more times than not, and the guy that I'm going to say, it doesn't always show up in the stat sheet what DeMarcus Lawrence does, because he's always filling those gaps. And especially, we know, to me, what he's more solid at, especially at this point of his career, is that run defense. He's a guy that we pretty much can shut down one side, because just with his knowing how to hold up gaps and hold up blocks, but at the same time, get through and force. We watched him last season. I'm going to say especially the biggest game that just pops out right to me, of course, is the Houston Texans game. He pretty much saved that game all on his own, just on that one specific play. Nice tackle in the backfield. DeMarcus Lawrence, I'm looking for him to just be a nice, solid, consistent piece. I can see a 6-7 sack season from him is going to be a great season for him, because that's all we're counting on him for at this point. We're counting on him to just be that veteran, to know how to pretty much get everybody else where they need to be that vocal leader, and to just continue to play as hard as he does. Also, Dorrance Armstrong, another guy we're talking about, 8.5 sacks, I believe, last season. Of course, he went on a little hot streak, but I feel, to me, Dorrance Armstrong is a guy that I felt is a little bit more expendable. So I would not have been upset not seeing him make this team, if he was even traded for something. Just because I did want to give a guy like Isaiah Land, which I'm hoping that's a guy that we can get back through these waivers, because I do not want him claimed. I feel like some team is going to find that untapped potential that Isaiah Land can potentially bring. He is a work in progress. He is a developmental piece. Again, like we say, everybody else, a little bit raw, but I feel like Isaiah Land just has some skills that would pretty much work on this team from day one. I don't care if we're talking about just a third down pass rusher. Isaiah Land, I felt, had a spot on his team. Dorrance Armstrong, he's going to be on this team again. So hopefully we can get another solid stretch of games from him. And hopefully he can just, contain and keep that going on throughout the entire season. So that is another piece. I guess we're going to have to just see how it works. Of course, I'm a big fan. Now we just have to work out all the off the field things. We have to work out the little quirks that he does have. I guess we've seen over this last year or so, Sam Williams being on this team. Sam Williams is a player I feel can potentially be a consistent double-digit sack leader on this team. Of course, you're playing opposite of a Micah Parsons, so I can see him being a future guy. But Sam Williams is going to have to actually show that he can take a step up, because one day Potential doesn't matter anymore. People don't want to hear about potential. People don't want to hear about what you can do, what people think you could have done. You have to get it done on the field. And I feel Sam Williams has the skill set. We just have to work out all the little extra things because he is going to continue to be a guy that I don't really worry about him when it comes to his intensity and the way that he plays. What I worry about him is just pretty much between the shoulders, I guess you want to say, his head. Can we get Sam Williams to be able to just be consistent? One time I cannot see him make a splash play, and then all of a sudden you don't really hear from Sam Williams for the rest of the game. You can't have that going into year 2, 3, 4 of your career because you're going to have to build some consistency. So hopefully Sam Williams can show that, and Dante Fowler, another Dan Quinn guy, he's got be able to give another chance, see exactly, kick the tires on him. What exactly can Dante Fowler get you? I can see him being another guy. We're talking about another 5-6 sack season, a guy that's going to be able to come in situationally. Kind of like I said, I would love to have seen Isaiah land, and hopefully we can get him back kind of like that in that same role. A guy you're going to be able to go throw out there when we're talking about in maybe just pass rush situations. We'll see. But I'm hopefully that's going to be a nice little thing that we can get I guess solidified. Just keep adding some more pass rush because you can't have too many of those guys. We know exactly what Mozzie Smith is expected to be. We're talking about our first round pick, 26th overall out of University of Michigan, big defensive tackle Mozzie Smith. Again, there have been kind of mixed conversations on him all preseason during the training camp process because, again, guys are trying to figure out what exactly is going to be his role on this upcoming team, of course. And it's been said, and I can't say it enough, of course. Mozzie Smith is going to be here to be a people eater. He's going to be here to be a space filler, a gap filler, a guy to pretty much take up bodies, take up blocks, to open up more opportunities for a guy like Micah Parsons, open up more opportunities for these pass rushers. We're talking about that's going to open up just so many things. Also, what a Jonathan Hankins can do, because we do know Jonathan Hankins, it was huge resigning him, big, because again, he was pretty much one of our major contributors when it comes to run defense. Especially once we traded for Jonathan Hankins, you instantly saw what that helped pretty much. I want to say instantly, the interior, the trenches, because again, as you saw prior to the Jonathan Hankins trade from the Raiders, there were just so many times that teams were just hitting us right up the middle, and there was not much we can do about it. Or exactly what you do when you have a dominant pass rusher or a dominant athlete in general. You have a Micah Parsons. A lot of times you got to find teams using those opportunities to run at that side of the field, because what that's going to do is take pretty much more bodies and more bodies. And if you don't have the rest of the group to pretty much to contain these issues, then it's going to pretty much open up more gaps anyway. So Micah Parsons can't do everything himself. Again, I already spoke on many times. We already see what exactly DeMarcus Lawrence is. So guys pretty much would just go right at the middle because they knew that's where our weakest spot. Jonathan Hankins was big when it comes to limiting things, because now Mozzie Smith, you're pretty much going to have that veteran guy like Jonathan Hankins to come in there and pretty much just teach you all the small details. Because one thing we can see, although Mozzie Smith is very strong, we know his insane powers, insane strength, he does have issues, again, when it comes to pretty much, he's going to be getting off the ball as quick as you can, because that's what's going to stop him. And to me, I'm going to say it's going to limit him in year one up to the point until he figures it out. Because, again, it's all instinct. One thing you saw lots of times is guys will be able to get under, even as strong as he is, guys will be able to get under his pads if he does not continue to speed up that get off. And again, that's going to take work. I'm not worried about him because, again, he's still raw, like many of these guys are. And again, everything we always talk about throughout the NFL draft, all the process, these prospects, everybody comes to the league and everybody is not day one ready to be an all-pro, Pro Bowl level top player. Now, every now and then, you're going to get your Micah Parsons. You're going to get these guys talking about opposite sides. You have Jamar Chases. We're talking about these guys getting to the league year one. They figured it out. That's just not the case for everybody. Again, we're talking about interior, the trenches. You're going against multiple veterans. You're talking about guys that have been in this league for years after years, especially on the offensive line. And you saw Mozzie Smith had those issues, but I'm not worried going into year one because, again, he is going to have someone to take a little bit of that pressure off of him. Also, you do see Osa Odigizua. I'm big. I'm very excited about what he was able to get done this preseason. You saw some just ferociousness. This kid, I'm gonna say this guy, he's not a kid at this point. We're talking about this guy. He literally has shown that he has continued to develop and build his game. Also, being able to stake that claim. We saw Quentin Bohanna. He was not able to make this team, because one thing you're going to find is that the more bodies you add into there, we're going to start picking out the weakest links. And of course, like I said, Osa Odigizua, he showed me enough that I feel like he's going to be a major contributor. And again, whatever that means, major contributing. We're going to say this line, I'm going to say, is the depth is going to be the biggest, I guess, calling card when you're looking for it. Because, again, Junior Fiocco, another draft pick out of this past draft, a guy that you're going to be pretty much looking into. Of course, coming out, it was is he going to be more of the outside linebacker? But he's to me, he wasn't as quick enough for that. But I guess you do when you watch him, he does have some instinct. He does have some get off. But what I guess the coaching staff instantly decided they wanted to kind of take a shot at in the dark is putting this kid on the interior. So we'll see exactly. Like I said, same thing. You're going to kind of look at some of these other guys. That first year might be a little bit of a red shirt. I'm sure Dan Quinn might try to find a spot here and there for a guy like Junior Fiocco, but I'm not expecting too much. But again, it's good just to see your rookies actually make this team, and hopefully they can continue to develop. Chauncey Golston. We know what Chauncey Golston been coming out of Iowa. He's a DN, but he's more of that run stopping type guy. He's not a guy you should not be looking at to really be coming and trying to be more of a pass rusher type. That's not his game. That's not what we're looking for from him. We're looking for, again, a guy that's just going to be able to know his gaps. We're looking at talking about lunch pail, your workers, your guys that pretty much just do their job and get the job done in that instance. So I feel like we're pretty much solid on the interior for right now. I do want to continue to see Mozzie Smith grow, and I feel like he will. So that's just a nice starting point. Now going on to linebacker, Leighton Vander Esch. I talk about Leighton Vander Esch, just the trajectory that we've seen at Dallas Cowboys fans from his year one against the amazing rookie year he had playing alongside a guy like Jalen Smith. We do know, unfortunately, both of these guys started dealing with injuries, and they never really got ever back to that point. Leighton Vander Esch still, what I will give him the most credit for is that he still, for some reason, has figured out how to just be that serviceable and consistent guy. And I said enough crazy times you can tell Leighton Vander Esch when he's not on the field, oddly enough, whether you like him, whether you don't like him, whatever it is. When Leighton Vander Esch is not on the field, you can definitely feel his presence, because one thing I will say is he just knows where to be. And we show at certain times, if his body is feeling okay and his head is mentally where he needs to be, Leighton Vander Esch is a guy that is going to be a solid, so I guess you want to say solid starting linebacker in this league. He's not a guy I feel like he's playing out of place or we're trying to take him a peg up. Leighton Vander Esch is going to be a nice veteran, and I'm glad to see him actually starting to make some plays, and honestly, what you got to see during the preseason and with more so training camp, especially because, again, most of these veteran guys didn't really get much run, if any at all, during the preseason. What you got to see, going back to training camp, I'll say, you got to see Leighton Vander Esch be used a little bit more in the pass rush department. Dan Quinn is going to sample and experiment with that a little bit this season, it seems, and I can't wait to see it, because I feel like that's just another added, I guess you want to say added factor that other opposing offenses are going to have to worry about. Now, Damone Clark, year 2, coming off the spinal fusion surgery. I wasn't expecting to see him at all last season, but unfortunately, we did get to see him, and this kid has some game. And the craziest thing you want to say is, he's gotten better off of that, just because I was worried. You hear the injuries and certain things like that, you start messing with the linebacker and his neck and the back and things like that. We do know, talking about Leighton Vander Esch with previous neck injuries. Damone Clark is a player. And now what you got to see, luckily, I am glad that he did get some preseason run, because you got to see a Damone Clark go out there and be able to put his head, again, just feel that physical contact. Because one thing we are going to see is that this defense is going to be a flying around type defense. So no, we can't have anybody that's going to be playing timid. Damone Clark, he's not a timid defender at all. And that's the biggest thing to be able to say. So I'm hoping, and I'm pretty confident I'm going to say now, in seeing that he's going to be that second linebacker right next to Leighton Vander Esch, and we're going to see these guys flying all over the field all season long. Devin Harper out of Oklahoma State, second year. We can all say now, Jabril Cox obviously did not make the team. I'm not sure what the team, if that was maybe just a waiver move, and hopefully they're trying to get him back. I'm not sure. Well, we saw how Jabril Cox, after the ACL injuries, now multiple times, unfortunate for him, but a guy I was kind of iffy about was a guy like Devin Harper. I wasn't really sure what he's going to bring out of Oklahoma State, but it's kind of seemed as if, again, this is a guy that used these preseason reps to his advantage. He actually showed up And he showed that he has some nice game, and he's a guy that can literally stick his hat in there and make some plays. And again, we're talking about guys that are going to be your, I guess you want to say, not even substitute linebackers, because the way that the league is now, it's so wide open, so spread out. You constantly need to keep fresh bodies, especially when we're talking about these linebackers. So Leighton Vander Esch, you have Damone Clark, throw Devin Harper in that mix. We're going to be able to see a guy like Devin Harper. I think potentially he can just be a nice special teams guy and also being a guy that we can kind of go in there, throw in there in certain packages. Whether we're talking about just adding another run defender, whether we're talking about a guy that's just going to be in there just to add some more pass rush. Because with Dan Quinn, you literally never know how he's going to throw these guys around and use them in certain situations, because we do know this next guy, Marquise Bell, out of Florida A&M, second-year undrafted guy. We're now looking at him. He's going to be now more of that hybrid safety we kind of see be used a little bit with a guy like Jaron Kearse. But I feel like, and also Donovan Wilson, of course. But we do know Donovan Wilson, we're hoping to get him back as soon as possible. So having a guy like Marquise Bell moving from the safety predominantly position, going to a line, more of a linebacker hybrid type dynamic, I guess, to pretty much fill in what we were going to what we're going to get from a guy like DeMarvion Overshown. Of course, we do know he's on IR. So most of these guys, you're going to have some spaces. So Marquise Bell, this is going to be his perfect opportunity to show if he can actually play that role, because this is now, we see how deep this team is. We can't keep everybody in the long run. Marquise Bell could be one of those guys we're looking at. He might be able to make a name for himself. And does that mean that he's going to possibly be somewhere to maybe stick at that position for the future for this team or this franchise? Will he find himself another role? Because again, hopefully we can get a DeMarvion Overshown back in the years to come. We'll see. I hope Marquise Bell can just fly around and show that he can actually just be a playmaker, because we're not looking for anything special at this point. You just want somebody that's going to be consistent and be able to add to this great mix of defensive talent that we do have. Now we can get into the secondary a little bit. Of course, Trayvon Diggs, that goes without speaking. Stephon Gilmore, those goes without speaking. But Trayvon Diggs going into now year 4. We're talking about going to year 4 with already 17 interceptions in his career. 3 his rookie year, 11 his second year, of course 3 last year. Last season, I felt he was more of a solidified cornerback. Year 2, he was that playmaker. He started to figure it out, of course. That's why he showed his more. He could easily play more off instinct in year 2, of course. But we saw, I say in year 3, he was a more well-rounded cornerback. So all the time that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, because one thing you're going to always have to be able to keep in check is that one thing Trayvon Diggs will do is he likes to make that big play when he thinks the opportunity is there. So, of course, what does that mean? You're going to be looking at Trayvon Diggs, and if there's some times that certain receivers, and especially, the play callers are going to be taking a look at this stuff. Trayvon Diggs, they feel like they can catch him on a double move here and there. But now, having Stephon Gilmore opposite of him, we're talking about 2019 Defensive Player of the Year, Super Bowl champion Stephon Gilmore. This guy is a technician when it comes to playing the cornerback position, a guy that understands detail. He understands just body placement. Where to sometimes it's not even about necessarily playing cornerback. It's not about completely locking a man down and staying right step for step every single time. Sometimes it's just about understanding positioning. Stephon Gilmore is a guy I feel like Trayvon Diggs should be able to take a lot from, because one thing that's going to do, now you have to pick your poison. You're not going to be able to avoid a Trayvon Diggs level type playmaker. You're not going to be able to just go with a Stephon Gilmore. Of course, what we're expecting is him to be able to still be a nice, solid corner for us. I feel like Stephon Gilmore is still high level impact type defensive back in this NFL, in the entire league. So a guy, I don't think that we're just getting an old veteran part. So Stephon Gilmore, Trayvon Diggs, having those two playing the opposite corner positions, that's going to be big for this team, knowing that we do have a Deron Bland, led the team last season with 5 interceptions. He's now going into year 2, playing that slot, nickel corner, whatever you want to consider it. Again, we're talking about in the NFL now. Lots of times you're going to see a lot of full wide receiver sets. So you're going to be able to find out, Deron Bland, who else can we get in that mix? We do know, we always say, the safety position and the way that Dan Quinn uses these DBs in general, especially corners, they're going to be all over the place. Guys are consistently going to be moving around. So Deron Bland, I'm looking for him to have a similar season to last year. Not necessarily 5 interceptions, because again, sometimes you're just going to find yourself in positions that the more you make these plays and the more you make a name for yourself, teams will start to avoid you a little bit. But that's what's going to make the biggest news about a guy like Jordan Lewis being activated from the PUP list. We do physically unable to perform, of course. Jordan Lewis, having him back in the mix, because again, once he went down, everyone was pretty much confused on where we were going to lead. That's why Deron Bland playing the way that he did last year was so big for the team. So having Jordan Lewis back in that mix and having him back in that room, that's going to be big. Now, again, I'm not worried about having pretty much lockdown cornerbacks all over the field. And we're going to say lockdown in tongue-in-cheek in a sense. But Jordan Lewis has shown that he's a very capable nickel corner, a very capable slot corner guy playing those corners, playing those boundaries. Because, again, we do know when you're playing that inside, you have so much field to cover. If we can get Jordan Lewis back to just even being pretty much 90% of what he was prior to the injury, we're going to be good to go, knowing that we do have such a deep room at this point. That's, to me, what made it possible to get rid of a guy like Kelvin Joseph. Now we know, Noah Igbignogany, I'm going to say. I'm hoping I said that right. I think I did. Former first-round pick a couple years ago for the Miami Dolphins, 30th overall pick, I believe, out of University of Auburn. We're talking about a guy, he played, first of all, again, we're talking about a guy that goes in the first round in the NFL draft, so obviously that's nothing to sneeze at. But he was also a kick returner for in Auburn. So is that the reason that this trade was made? Kelvin Joseph goes to the Miami Dolphins, and we get a cornerback, Noah Igbignogany. He's going to be someone I guess I'm going to keep an eye on, just because where exactly is he fitting into this equation? Dan Quinn, I don't know if Dan Quinn was written off on this or anything, wrote off on this, excuse me. But I guess it's going to say I guess that's another rangy guy. I believe he's like 5'11". He's not the tallest guy, but again, it's nice, solid space. So are you going to ask yourself, what exactly is he going to be able to find himself in? We do know that, I guess you want to say the experiment, the boss man fat, the Kelvin Joseph experiment. We had much higher hopes, of course, for a guy you take in the second round. That's usually where you're still having some hope that a guy can come in and make some plays for you. Kelvin Joseph, it just seemed he would always be one step off, one play off, one move away, and at the end of the day, that people are going to lose patience with it. And that's, to me, what it felt like that's what happened with the Dallas Cowboys. Kelvin Joseph just was never exactly what we expected, going to, again, just a situation where we're adding more and more depth. Look at a guy that we added in the draft, Eric Scott Jr. He's longer, he's rangier, and we do know Dan Quinn, going back to his Legion of Boom, the Seattle Seahawks days, he loves these longer, bigger corners, physical guys that you can kind of get in there. And of course, we're talking about a guy with some nice athleticism. We do now have to figure out Eric Scott. This is going to be year one. So I don't want to say red shirt, but that's pretty much how you get a lot of guys, a lot of fans, I say overall, should be looking at some of these young kids. Just let them develop. Take this year one as a red shirt when you're in the deep positions like our secondary is. We do know we have multiple bodies, and one thing we saw was the issue last year. You can't have too many. So I'm not sure. I don't want to speak on too much on what a Noah Igbignogany is, but I'm going to say Eric Scott Jr., this is going to be his year to learn. This is going to be his year to kind of pick up some steam from some of these veterans and pick up whatever he can. Nashawn Wright, another versatile guy. He got moved around a little bit. We saw he played a big part. And again, I want to say go back to a Titans game last year. Once Anthony Brown went away, it was crazy enough, as bad as we felt Anthony Brown was, and of course he definitely was on a lot of different occasions. Still, it somehow got worse when Anthony Brown left the team. So Nashawn Wright kind of found himself at certain positions, finding some more playing time for himself. So now, again, we're going to another year. You're going to have to keep learning, because we do know we're pretty much heavy up top. You have your Diggs, you have your Gilmore, you have Bland. Now you're going to have Lewis back, Jordan Lewis come back off the PUP list. So you're going to have some time for some of these guys, barring injuries, of course, knock on wood. Nobody wants any injuries or anybody to be banged up. But this is going to be a perfect situation for an Eric Scott Jr. and Nashawn Wright. And again, this Noah Igbignogany, we're going to see what exactly he is. I don't want to speak too much on him because, again, I will be sounding misinformed because, again, everything is new. I'm going to take a look. I think we all will, but we'll see how this cornerback room goes. But for now, of course, definitely at the top, we have lots of pieces to play around with. Of course, the safety position, This is one of the deepest safety, I'm going to say safety rooms in the entire league, in my opinion. We're looking at guys like Donovan Wilson. Just recently got his new extension, new contract. Also the same for Malik Hooker. He got his extension. So what exactly does this mean for a guy like Jaron Kearse? I want to see Jaron Kearse with this team just because the versatility, and he's so vocal. One thing I will say, kind of in the same likeness of a Micah Parsons, to a different extent, of course. Jaron Kearse is the vocal guy, and he is very comfortable in being that. And everybody doesn't have that gene. He's a full-blown leader, and he's shown since he came here. We're talking about a guy that kind of bounced around a little bit from Detroit. We're talking about the Minnesota Vikings. He seemed to have found a home with the Dallas Cowboys. I'm speaking of Jaron Kearse. Dan Quinn loves this guy because, again, we're talking about the green dot on the helmet. That's the guy pretty much being your defensive leader. He's calling the plays. He's being able to communicate with your defensive coordinator. And that just tells exactly the importance of a guy like Jaron Kearse. Malik Hooker, he's your center fielder. He's played that so well to the point sometimes you won't even notice what Malik Hooker is doing on the field. And to me, that's the best thing. We're talking about DBs and O-linemen. I say, if people don't know your name, sometimes that's a good thing, because that means you're obviously not giving something up, or you're just not getting beat. And I'm going to say Malik Hooker plays that perfect center fielder, knowing that we do have this hybrid type safety linebacker, or just the way that they're used, at least. Malik Hooker is that guy over the top, usually helping out your digs. He's helping out your guys. He's going to be helping out guys like Bland and Gilmore and Lewis. So, what does that do? That allows guys like Donovan Wilson and Jaron Kearse to be able to move around a little bit more, because we do know Jaron Kearse is more of your guy that's covering your tight ends. He's going to be that guy that's going to be physical up on the line of scrimmage. Donovan Wilson, that's your missile. Once we get him back, we're going to be able to finally put all these pieces together. So I'm just looking forward to guys like that. Again, we're talking about three guys that have kind of found themselves as staples over these last couple seasons: Donovan Wilson, Malik Hooker, Jaron Kearse. The sky's the limit for them. Throwing in Israel Mukuamu, a versatile guy. Again, if we can just speak on it. We're talking about from South Carolina, of course, a guy that kind of moved around here and there. He plays a little corner, plays some safety. Last season, but especially this training camp process, you got to see him move around a little bit. Israel Mukuamu, you found him in playing a little corner, playing a little, I want to say a big safety, we're going to call it, because, again, Dan Quinn loves to occupy this big nickel that we love to run. And because, again, you have so many veterans. I mean, it's not so many veterans, but you have so many DBs in general that you feel comfortable in. Israel Mukuamu can find himself possibly in that mix, because, again, we do know we move guys around a lot. You will have to find certain times to get guys, just not even a rest, but you will have to find certain times that you will find guys like Israel Mukuamu that will have to come in and make some plays. And I feel like he has the potential to find himself in the right positions, because that's how much I trust Dan Quinn. Also, Wanye Thomas, great story. Great story for a guy like him. He made some plays. Go back to the first preseason game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The first drive, interception of Trevor Lawrence. That is just, again, we're adding to the pot of guys. What they say, it's pretty much an embarrassment of riches. That's the way we want to look at it, because Dan Quinn is just always going to keep looking to add and add. And one thing I love about this front office in general now, is they're allowing him to actually get his guys, and guys that he feels comfortable with and guys that he's confident in. We're allowing him to be a part of this. And Wanye Thomas, I want to see exactly what he's going to add to this team. I can see, of course, this year upcoming, he's going to be more of a special teams guy. I can see him also finding his spots here and there, barring injuries. Again, knock on wood. No one wants anything like that. But Wanye Thomas, nice story. I'm glad to see him make this team. Up to this point, we already know special teams is one of the biggest things, and especially kicker has been such of a conversation this entire offseason, because we do know what Brett Maher, I guess you want to say that roller coaster that was Brett Maher. Nice season. Again, we did see what Brett Maher was a couple years ago, and then, of course, fell off the wagon. And then he leaves and returns again, and he has a nice, solid stretch. And then towards the end of the season, the wheels just fall off. And Brett Maher finds himself on the outs, because one thing that, again, I've said since day one of this offseason, once the kicker position was obviously up in limbo and up in the air, the number one thing was said: you cannot let kicking be one of the things that fails this team this upcoming season, because, again, with all these high hopes, you cannot build up a defense. You cannot build up an offense and find schemes that you feel are going to be perfect and let special teams be the thing that pretty much ruins this entire process. You cannot. So I'm going to hope that Brandon Aubrey showed enough that he can be consistent. I'm going to hope that he has the confidence. And maybe sometimes that's what it takes. I still have big hopes that we can potentially, if things fall off the wagon, you still have some veterans out there that you can take a look at. I'll tell you again, we're talking about guys like Mason Crosby. Then that's just a name to throw out there. There are some guys that are out there potentially that you can still be able to come in for maybe a stretch run that you can still feel some confidence in. But I'm going to say, give Brandon Aubrey a chance. Week 1, that's where it all starts. He has nothing, but there are no excuses at this point. Pretty much, you're the guy. Go in there and show what you are. Again, we saw he has the leg, 59-yard kick, I believe, that he made in this last preseason game against the Las Vegas Raiders. A guy that shows he has gotten a little bit more consistent throughout training camp. It started very shaky at the start of training camp. Of course, the competition in quotation between him, Tristan Vizcaino, Brandon Aubrey got the upper hand, I guess. And again, to me, it was by default because it was that bad to start off for both of these guys. But he kind of picked up a little steam. He's shown a little bit more consistency over the last couple games. I'm not going to say I'm confident in him at all. I'm not trying to paint that picture. But I'm going to say week 1, I feel like he's earned maybe week 1. Let's just see what he can do. Brian Anger, we do know that, again, it's consistent. He's been with this team for the last few years. So this is a guy that we're just pretty much, you want to keep as much of your solidified pieces, whether it's special teams, whatever it is. You want to keep as much of many of those guys as possible. I'm not really worried about Brian Anger. We're talking about the punting situation. We do know field position is one of the most important things in football in general. We're talking about a game of inches. Everything counts. So I feel like we know what he is. He's going to get the job done to the best of his ability, and we can just roll out from there.
Again, this is the roster for right now for the Dallas Cowboys. So let's take a little time just to be a little patient and see exactly how things work themselves out, because there are some guys that hopefully will be able to return to this team. Again, like I said already, I'm looking hopefully to bring a guy like Isaiah Land back. Of course, I'm not really sure he's going to pass through these waiver wires unclaimed, because that he does have the potential. And you saw the stretch and the bend that he does have as a rusher. Again, he is a work in progress, but I can see a team willing to give him a chance and see what he can do for their team. So hopefully a guy like that can slip through these waiver wires, and return to this team. Also, a guy like Jalen Moreno Cropper, I still think has some potential. I think he's just a little raw, so you want to get him some more work. Practice squad will help him, especially because to me, he's another guy I can see being a returner for you potentially, and being a guy that can work in the slot. But again, he does need some work. We do know that there are some guys that came in and kind of put their foot down, like guys like Jalen Brooks, which I'm big about, like I've said many times at this point. So we'll see how it goes. Week 1 will be right around the corner, so we'll see how the Dallas Cowboys and his coaching staff continue to mold things and shape the rest of this roster. So it's a lot to be talked about going into week 1. We will be here to do it all. I appreciate you guys for all the support. You guys are amazing. Go Cowboys.